YouTubers, and I'm back for another YouTube video of what would have happened if this were in real life RhinoTMRT gameplay series. Now, I've been trying time and time again, over and over again, and I mean, just so I can come back to the regular YouTube videos of these, and it's actually very obvious. I mean, I wanted to do it in here because it felt very different and well, I knew exactly what it was, and well, yeah, I guess it kind of does make a lot of sense. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of was hoping I would have a lot of time for this, and well, it just felt very obvious, and yeah, I guess it kind of does. So, yeah, I guess it does, and I mean, I was in here for one of these YouTube videos, so it's kind of very great to come back to here for that and all. So, yeah. So this is what would have happened if the Goonies 2 were in real life. So we cut open to the beginning with Sloth and all the other Goonie characters, well, Chunk and Data and all the and Brand and all the others. They all come back as Chunk eventually as this eventually takes place so many years takes place later in the future, so many years after the first Goonies movie, where the Goonies and Sloth themselves are enjoying their time. In which case, I guess that kind of does make sense. That is until when they go under the basement, when they find out, when both Sloth and the Goonies actually find another hidden map that actually shows that there was actually a treasure long before One-Eyed Willie's treasure, and it was said to have magical powers, which this would be known as the Goonie. This would be known as the human treasure, the human treasure of the old pirates. Yeah, the human treasure of the old pirates is actually was a treasure was a treasure was gold were gold that came out long before One-Eyed Willie's treasure. So the Sloth and the Goonies, they eventually go out to the same place, but they're going to the same place where they were, but underground, where the where the you know the where the uh, so Sloth and the Goonies, they eventually go find the treasure, the underground treasure of the old pirates. And it turns out, and then just before then, the Fratellis, they also appear in this. So the Fratellis, now we cut open to the Fratellis, where they are still in prison. However, they know that they find out that they easily find out that Sloth and the Goonies are going to find the underground treasure of the old pirates, which is a treasure that existed long before the One-Eyed Willie's treasure. So the Fratellis eventually do this by eventually disguising themselves as people, kind of like how Daniel Hillard from Mrs. Doubtfire disguised himself as Mrs. Doubtfire himself, which is kind of very obvious. So the Fratellis eventually disguise themselves as free random people that easily exist, that they easily would know about. And then they easily go to jail, and then they use decoys that eventually blow up the whole police station and the jail and everything. So the Fratellis are easily freed, and the police are all gone. However, one of them is still alive. So one of them is still alive, and of course the only one remaining cop in the Goonies 2 actually is connected to it is actually connected to the main characters in a different way. So Sloth and the Goonies, they eventually easily find their way back to place where they went to find One-Eyed Willie's treasure, and they eventually dig downwards that old place where they were going to find um One-Eyed Willie's treasure, and they eventually dig down and they find a ladder down. They find a ladder connected to some dirt. So they find a ladder. So there was some dirt above it, but then below it there was actually a ladder. So all the Sloth and the Goonies, they all go down, including Chunk and all. Which I guess you could easily say that, and this is kind of how the plot is going through. So yeah, I just wanted to make it look like this, and yeah, I kind of wanted it to be like that. So yeah, so Sloth and the Goonies, they all go down, and well, yeah, I guess they all go down, and they go down the ladder, and then they find a path, and then they find four different paths that four different paths that one of them would be eventually lead that one of them would four underground paths that would eventually lead them to the underground treasure of the old pirates. So they eventually choose one of them, which actually ends up being the right one, and all the other ones were just wrong, and they all just fall down to the ground, kind of like how sand falls down to the ground. The dirt from the other three doors all fall down to the ground, and they all disappear, which is kind of a very neat feature to all that. Meanwhile, the Fratellis are going back to the old place, which of course, which they easily escape using their free identities. Then, of course, they head back to the same place where they were to stop to stop the Goonies from getting the One-Eyed Willie's treasure. When of course they find the ladder, and then they eventually go down. Meanwhile, Slope and the Goonies, they all they all go through like something similar. Like they go through like a few couple of traps, and then they set up some Data obviously sets up some traps in case the Fratellis were after them. In case the Fratellis or any bad guys were after them, which is kind of a very neat feature, and I just wanted that to happen. So yeah, and so the Slop and the Goonies, they eventually set up the traps for the Fratellis, get that going, and then which they would later, like get onto that, and I guess that kind of does make a lot of sense. They would eventually do that. The the Fratellis, they are all walking through, and then Data's traps actually sets up, and then the Fratellis actually go through three different areas. So they're gonna have to find the three of them are eventually gonna have to find a way to get back to themselves if they are to stop Sloth and the Goonies from getting the underground treasure of the old pirates. From getting that. So eventually all three of them meet up together, only to find out that Sloth and the Goonies are actually in front of them. So Sloth and the Goonies eventually easily run away from the three Fratellis, and judging by that, they run like super fast and all that. And then just before that, one of the police officers, the cop that survived the Fratelli's explosion, actually appears in front of the Free Fratelli, Sloth, and the Goonies, which just so happens to give Sloth old memories of the Fratellis invading Sloth's invading Sloth's, destroying Sloth's home and his family, and of course, getting rid of like all that. So yeah, so Sloth eventually has those memories, and then he finds it, and then Sloth's father, who of course is actually very obvious, actually appears, and it turns out that he easily helps Sloth and the Goonies eventually hide from the Free Fratellis in another hiding cave, and saying that the Fratellis the three of them escape from the Fratellis, and then Sloth's father explains to Sloth and the Goonies that he's been disguising himself as a cop, and has been watching the Goonies and Sloth ever since they both met. Ever since they both met and ever since they were around. So Sloth's father was actually around since then. However, it would later be appeared that Sloth's real mother was actually gone because of Fratelli. So yeah, I guess it kind of does make sense. Yeah. So eventually, they easily find a way out of the tunnel, and the cave tunnel. And they eventually find the underground treasure of the old pirates, which just so happens the three Vitellis are there. Then, of course, there's a pirate fight and pirate battle, which in my opinion is actually one of the best ones there is. So supposedly the Goonies eventually fight back against the Vitelli, Soda Sloth, and his father. However, then there's this one big emotional fight scene where Sloth's father actually sacrifices himself, and this is all like, oh yeah, very obvious. So Sloth's father he eventually gets killed by the three Fratellis, and then Sloth actually holds Sloth's own father in his hands, and then Brand, the guy with the strong muscles, eventually punches the Fratellis free of them into rocks, thus getting rid of the three Fratellis. The three Fratellis are then later dead. Meanwhile, and then Sloth eventually, and the Goonies, including Brand, the Sloth and Goonies, and including Brand, they all hold Sloth's father and then Sloth's father says, "Son, Sloth, you are a great one. You are a great son of mine, and I will never forget it." And yeah, I guess, and then that's pretty much it. So then they carry Sloth's father's body and the underground treasure. They carry themselves out of there, including Sloth's father's dead body and of course the underground treasure of the old pirates. And then they all get a funeral for him. The Fratellis they tell them that the Fratellis died, and then there's a happy, great emotional ending that would eventually go on forever. The end. And then we get a post-credit scene where one of the Fratellis, where the Mama Fratelli actually gives birth to one of the new Fratellis, and then the Uncle Fratelli says, "You'll make a fine Fratelli to me and only to me." And then cut to black. The Uncle Fratelli laughs, gives a loud, evil laugh. And that's my take on what would have happened if the Goonies 2 were in real life. Now, I mean, I enjoyed it, and I really did, and I guess it kind of does make sense. So, yeah. So, anyway, that's it for today. Peace out.